percentages do not favor a successful journey. Disaster through malfunction predicted.
In the late 70s, for reasons unknown, okay, maybe not that unknown, there were lots of space set adventure films full of special effects, action, and cute robots. Some were fun to watch, and others, well...
I'll be going back to the ship now.
Here's a movie named after a book that's in no way connected to the thing that it's named after. I mean, just ask my friend Matty, who still tells people his nickname is Stud McMuffin.
That was my plan.
H.G. Wells' The Shape of Things to Come.
Under my rule, the people will want for nothing. Except freedom.
H.G. Wells' The Shape of Things to Come is a Canadian science fiction movie released in 1979.
For what purpose?
In order to review this movie, we'll need to reference other media. It's not just because the movie was made in a certain era where many films were inspired by one another, but because those films are so much more interesting than what we have on offer here.
Sound general alarm.
In 1933, H.G. Wells published The Shape of Things to Come, which told a story that had some eerie parallels with the timing of the Second World War and the invention of weapons of mass destruction. But it also got a few other things wrong, like having everybody turning into geniuses.
This is a very old book.
Bless. The book was adapted into a movie in 1936, and then for some reason in the late 70s, this film arrived.
Man's future is limited only by his imagination and his vision of the stars.
H.G. Wells' The Shape of Things to Come, because apart from one character name, it has absolutely no relation to the source material, just as Fanta has little relation to the taste of an orange. A clunkily worded and error-laden title card kicks off this film's attempt at world building.
John, this is total madness. This creation of yours, Starstreak, it hasn't even been tested. We don't even know if the damn thing will fly.
This film does have a plot that requires a lot of laborious exposition to set the scene and give us an idea of who the characters are, a task that the film handles about as well as a cat hired to control traffic on nighttime road construction. There's a theory that if you gave a monkey an infinite number of keystrokes at a typewriter over an infinite amount of time, you'd eventually get the works of William Shakespeare. Eventually. So this film is obviously some of the Simians' earliest work, and it's still a first draft.
Now what's that?
Nothing serious.
Apparently at some point there was a robot war and Earth has been abandoned, and then there's a new place on the moon called New Washington. But on another planet, Delta 3, the governor, Nikki, has been overthrown by Omus.
This is Omus, Robot Master on Delta 3.
In a relatively restrained performance by Jack Palance. Believe it or not. Omus's full name is Omus of Dip, brother of Guacamole, Baba Ganoush and Tzatziki. Everybody needs this drug Radic Q2 to hold radiation at bay. And of course, wouldn't you know it, it only comes from Delta 3. This is all a complete mess, and if I've mixed things up a bit, then apologies, but this is a story that seems concocted by people who, if they've ever watched a science fiction movie in their life, they are doing an exceedingly good impression of people who've never watched a science fiction movie in their life. There's this experimental spaceship, Starstreak, which Dr. Campbell intends to steal to confront Omus.
I'm taking Starstreak to Delta 3.
But we have orders from Lomax.
No, the master computer is wrong. Softwares now could destroy us. I'm going to stop Omus.
Campbell, along with his son Jason and his friend Kim Smedley, daughter of Senator Smedley, take off in the ship. They head to Earth, with a new friend in tow, a reprogrammed robot now called Sparks. Sparks can teleport and he can pilot the ship, and crucially for the era, it can make cute comments, but unfortunately has difficulty using a battery-operated salt grinder. On the abandoned Earth, Jason and Kim explore. Jason magically makes an old Jeep work, and the pair find a few children who've survived the robot wars.
They're children!
They tell the children that they'll look after them. And then Kim and Jason abandon the kids in case it cramps their style as they head off to Delta 3.
You are just a robot, aren't you?
I'm afraid so, but if there is any change, you'll be the first to know.
On Delta 3, they meet up with deposed Governor Nikki and some of her followers, before Omus makes an impressive appearance. Well, I say impressive, it says impressive on the script in quotation marks, but whatever.
However impressive your holographic invention.
Ah, Doctor. I have many impressive things to show you in my citadel.
Dr. Campbell and his former protege Omus say hi to each other.
Let me give you your last lesson on the power of science.
Jason and Kim decide to follow Jason's dad, but they're too late. Then, well, let's see, the robots kill Nikki's followers by smashing in their heads with rocks. Omus tries to melt Jason's brain, but Sparks somehow reprograms the robots and Jason grabs the magical mental goldfish bowl and, well, I think the movie ends with Omus defeated and Jason, Kim, Nikki and Sparks heading back to New Washington with supplies of the anti-radiation drug as Delta-3 explodes. Look, I assume they felt everything was tied up with a neat bow. Well, maybe not. It's pretty bad. There's really no way of sugarcoating this. Often when we look at things that are, tries they might just didn't come off, in amongst the jokes, we try and see if there was any potential. But in the case of this film, there was really none. Yeah, it's clearly a production made on a tight budget. But in the wake of Star Wars' success in 1977, it was that little bit easier to get financing for a movie if it was a space opera or a space set adventure. So that may have inspired the producers to put this thing together.
Hey buddy, I can get us money to make a science fiction movie.
Hey, that's great! Let's make a science fiction movie! Just one question. What's science fiction?
British-born producer Harry Alan Towers had a long catalogue of cheaply produced films, often based on classical novels. H.G. Wells' The Shape of Things to Come? Well, it in no way proves to be the outlier here. Director George McCowan had made a few films here and there, but moved to directing mostly television, Canadian and American, after this film. So that means no sequel to H.G. Wells' The Shape of Things to Come called H.G. Wells' The Shape of Things Gone Pear-Shaped. The film has a cast that individually are better in almost anything else. Here, everyone seems to give a uniformly flat performance, made worse by the terrible and trite dialogue.
My dear doctor, it would be disastrous, as tragic as the robot wars that devastated the Earth planet.
It's a mostly Canadian cast. Eddie Benton would be better known as Anne-Marie Martin in Days of Our Lives and Sledgehammer. Barry Morse had starred in The Fugitive and Space 1999. Barry Morse, bless him, does seem to be trying to inject some life into this, but then he's repaid with all of the scenes requiring him pulling silly faces. Carole Lynley was one of those guest stars who popped up in many American television series and movies from the 60s to the 80s. And Jack Palance shows up in a performance that's mildly restrained for most of the film, that is, until he unleashes his volcanic acting fury. Or not, in your own time, Jack.
I am the creator!
The folks behind the sets and the costumes seem to have researched what cool high-tech futuristic designs might look like, and then set their notes on fire and instead repurposed whatever bits and bobs they could acquire on the cheap. And it's also good to know that Honeywell is still in business after the robot wars.
If we can get the Delta-3, we could pick up a supply of Radek and be back here in a few days.
I'm not going to criticise the special effects since they seem like low-hanging fruit. They are surprisingly adequate, in a Blake 7 on a good day sort of way. They're not particularly great, they're just not absolutely terrible. They are in no way in the same league as American television series of the day, because, these are still spaceships filmed against a black background with a couple of fairy lights providing the stars. Occasionally, the film runs to a bit of back projection, but there's very, very little in the way of optical effects and compositing. If they could do it cheaply in camera, they did it cheaply in camera.
Look, you're sure it's not some sort of communication problem?
Jason, right now I'm not sure of anything. I just don't want to take any chances.
If you've ever seen Buck Rogers in the 25th Century, a TV series made around the same time, and in particular if you've ever seen its disappointingly drab second season, you might get the sense that Things to Come is a movie that could only dream of being mistaken for a second season episode of Buck Rogers. Even Galactica 80 is a stretch. The 2012 movie Argo, one of my favourites, is based on real events where a CIA operative, Tony Mendez, sets up a fake Canadian science fiction movie in order to provide cover for the extraction of 6 American embassy workers hiding in Iran. In Argo, the fake film Argo is presented as having exotic locations with over-the-top creature designs and robots. This film, an actual Canadian science fiction movie from 1979...
What does Argo mean?
It means Argo fuck yourself.
We have some random exteriors doubling for multiple planets, apparently shot in Ontario and Quebec, though you may be surprised to learn nobody seems particularly willing to talk about the film. There's a bit of random footage of people running to catch a flight to Vancouver, and a lovely looking geodesic dome to represent the beauty of New Washington. Then the rest of the film is set in some very plain looking rooms.
My first responsibility is through the moon colony. Naturally, I'm concerned about the Earth people.
Now again, it's hard to estimate how much is down to a tight budget and time constraints, and how much is down to a lack of vision. Some camera setups are repeated again and again, like they really liked this shot of the elevator door. I mean, really. Of course, they lit it once and then just bashed out each scene one after the other in probably less than half an hour. If I wanted to be charitable, I would say the lack of time is the reason why everything is so flat. This is a film that screams shot in one take. I can't find too much that's particularly good about this movie, and sometimes I like some cheesy stuff, but this is one of those cheese platters that's been left out in the sun just a little bit longer than is optimal, attracting insects of all types. Canada is in a weird place in terms of science fiction. For decades now, the country has provided a production base for many well-known science fiction movies and television series made by American companies. But at the same time, they weren't particularly well known for producing homegrown science fiction. Even this early 1970s made-in-Canada television series, The Starlost, was initially kicked off in the US. One of that series' producers, William Davidson, also produced this film, and then afterwards wrote for The Littlest Hobo. I'm sure there's absolutely no link whatsoever. The robot design in this film is top-notch. Top-notch? Sorry, I'm holding the scripts upside down. It should read, "The robot design scrapes the bottom of the barrel." They lumber like they were choreographed by Frankenstein's monster's son, Todd.
Yeah, well, I guess we could all use something to eat, huh?
Sure.
Nothing for me, thanks.
Okay.
H.G. Wells' The Shape of Things to Come does not come off as a movie that anybody was desperate to make. So is it just a shameless cash grab? Most movies are produced with the idea that it will make its backers money. Usually the people making the film will do their best to make a decent movie.
Out there is the vastness of space.
It may not always seem that way, but no one really sets out to make a bad film. Whether in the case of this movie it was a lack of inspiration, being out of sync with the genre, having no money or time, or all of the above, or maybe just no one gave a fuck, who the hell knows?
You are the one who inspired me, taught me to place science above all else.
But never above humanity!
Aside from, hey, Star Wars is doing well, let's make a sci-fi film, this film has no reason to exist. And as such, turns out to be a confusing mess. It's like going to Comic-Con and asking a 7-foot roided-out security guard whether they're supposed to be Paul Blart or Mike from Mike and Molly.
7 years since the last of the great robot wars, and the end of civilization as we had known it.
Is H.G. Wells' The Shape of Things to Come worth watching? No.
I think that there's a way through the abandoned caverns into the power plant.
But it is a car crash, and not a good one where a truck flips over and lands upside down on another truck. But if you insist on watching, it's a fun one to get a group of friends together and watch this movie after everybody's been at the whiskey for at least a solid hour. Because it's the only way to fly. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, leave a comment below, or check out some of our other videos.
You are the dark lady of my sonnets, the lily of my valley.
Yeah, you can call me Kim. Looks like I made a poet out of you, friend.